Ari O'Neill. Ari is a graphic designer who designed the Main State Breastfeeding Coalition's logo. So give it up for that. Ari is also a doula, a postpartum doula, a lactation counselor, and a mother of one. So you know that she takes supporting postpartum families very seriously. And she is here to share her perspective on her daughter's birthday. So please give it up for Ari.
It was a time that I will never forget and never fully remember. I remember pushing it home for hours in the water, on my knees, on my back, just pushing. I laid down for a quick rest, and when I awoke, I was able to say, I'm having a hard time speaking. The words were just kind of not really coming out the way I wanted them to. In went the IV the midwives had with them. More pushing as I slipped in and out of consciousness. One of the midwives asked me my name. I told her Ari. She asked me my husband's name, and I didn't know. And then it all went black. And this part of the story is all secondhand information because I was in a coma, eyes wide open, but completely unresponsive. I don't know if you know any type 1 diabetics, but similar to that. We arrived at the hospital in an ambulance that my sister Bree, my doula, had demanded her way onto. And the delivering doctor checked between my legs. Oh yeah, we can get this baby out. So they set me up in delivery, and it was go time. With Bree on one side and my original midwife on the other, holding my knees as high and wide as they possibly could, screaming at me to push right in my face. Every time the monitor read that I was contracting, my daughter Edie was delivered with a vacuum assist and a significant tear in 3 contractions. Blue and asphyxiated. That's how close we were, you guys. Okay. Blue and asphyxiated. They set her on my chest, and I just completely ignored her. In walked my husband. He'd missed the whole thing. They wouldn't let him on the ambulance with me, and so he rode with one of our midwives. I had been gearing this man up my entire pregnancy, and it was a very long one, for that magical moment when you first meet your child, how there's just no other feeling like it in the world. And he walked into a bloodbath, a blue kid, and a comatose wife. And then they carted me away. I sort of remember coming to a bit in the ICU with the spring late afternoon sun shining in, the clock on the wall reading some time that I just could not figure out, no matter how I squinted my eyes or tried to make sense of the numbers. And I remember examining my left hand. I just kept looking at it. I was like, something is not right. I didn't know that they had taken my wedding ring off when they attempted to do an MRI. And I was glancing under my gown, and I was like, this is not my body. Normally I'm much thinner than this. I had no idea I'd ever been pregnant, let alone just given birth. Millions of thoughts are racing through my head, but not a single word can escape through the iron curtain of my mouth. And I remember thinking, this must be what it feels like to have a stroke. Sometime, I don't know when, Josh, my husband, he came into the room and he sat at my bedside and he told me that I had birthed our daughter. And she was beautiful and amazing. And then he said something like, I will do my absolute best to raise her on my own. But I need you, we need you to stay with us. I leaned up, this was like in a movie. I leaned up, wrapped my arm around his neck as we cried into each other's shoulders. And then the doctor made him leave because he was making me too emotional. And then it all went black again. Awake some hours later to my brother at my bedside. He had driven 3 hours to Central Maine because nobody knew whether Edie and I would live or die. He told me that she had a seizure hours earlier and had been transported from Maine General to the NICU at Maine Med, and that there was an ICU room waiting for me there as well. Everything is a blur until I arrived in Portland. And then 10, I think it was 10 or 11, I don't know, 10 doesn't make sense anymore, right? But like 10 or 11 hours post-delivery, words started to come a little bit more capably, but they still moved from my mind to my mouth like molasses. I still had not consciously seen my daughter, and by this time I knew that I needed her. In walks a doctor with an iPad. The FaceTime on the screen is Edie. There she is. She's naked except for a diaper. The bright light illuminating her from above, and she has 4 electrodes on her head. Wires and tubes everywhere. My baby, my sweet, sweet, darling daughter. This is not how we were supposed to meet. Everyone expects joy to just stream from me, but I'm just drowning in the sadness of all of it. Again, I am lost for words, but this time it's because everything about this is just so so wrong. Hyponatremia, that's what got us into this position. What took my words, my home birth away, what gave Edie a seizure. So your blood sodium level should be between 135 and 145 milliequivalents per liter, for those who are not doctors in the house. I didn't know that before. Anything below 125, they say, can cause coma, check. Seizure, check. Or even death. Edie and I both measured in at 116 when she was delivered. 2 days prior to all of this, at 41 weeks and 5 days gestation, it's a very, very long pregnancy. My midwives wanted to induce with herbs, this like gnarly concoction of blue and black cohosh, castor oil, and orange juice. And the instructions were very strict to take them first thing in the morning. The ingredients didn't arrive to me until late afternoon, so I remember saying out loud, "This is the universe telling me not to do this." And I told the midwives as much, but they insisted I take them the following morning. And you know what? I trusted them. I'd done this hundreds of times. What could go wrong? So at 41 weeks, 6 days, herbs and castor oil just swimming around in my system, I was going to the bathroom all day, like all day. And as I labored through the night, that slowed down. But the following morning, as I was contracting over the birth pool, I knew I needed to throw up. Miraculously, a bucket appeared in front of me, and I promptly filled it with an insane amount of liquid. Though I swear I was not taking in fluids in excess. What I now think happened is that this herbal induction mixed with my hypothyroidism had dehydrated me to such a point that it threw me into hyponatremia. So now back to Maine Med, 1 day postpartum, still in the ICU, still have not consciously seen or held or smelled my child. By about midday, my sodium stabilized enough to move me up to labor and delivery. I still don't really understand the layout of the hospital. I think we were 1 floor apart. It might as well have been a million miles, doesn't matter. At 26 hours after I delivered Edie, I was wheeled into her room with nerves akin to the blind date where I met her dad. Would she like me? Would she know me? How could we ever make up for those precious hours lost to the abyss? So I asked the nurse, can I hold her? This person who had been inside my body for 42 full weeks is now in the care of someone else. As you guys know, that's hard to do. and it felt like some kind of cruel joke to have to ask permission to interact with her. So with some help, I settled in the recliner next to her, and with the arranging of her wires and tubes and my wires and tubes, our flesh finally touches. And she's crying, because that's what babies do. And I started humming her this lullaby that I had made up and had been singing to her in the weeks leading up to her birth, and she immediately calmed down. My heart exploded. The hugeness of everything just rained down on me at once, and tears came for loss and for love, for misery and for joy, for elation and exhaustion. How could we ever move forward from this? How would we ever remember it all? And how would we ever forget? I stayed with her as much as I was allowed, but as a patient whose blood and urine was constantly monitored, it was never enough. It was like a half hour here, an hour there. So when we were apart, I tried to rest so I could heal and we could be together, but the nightmares of everything kept me awake. So I pumped. All the hopes and dreams I had for my birth were just set on fire. So I would be damned if I couldn't feed my kid. I couldn't be there for her when she had an MRI at 2 days old at 3 in the morning, but I made sure she had my milk to drink when she got back. Every ounce of my motherhood had been stripped from me at this point, so I clung tightly to my one ability to support her, my breast milk. On day 2 in main med, so she's 3 days old, we learned that Edie has 2 stroke spots on her brain. Josh and I kept it together, unlike I'm doing right now, through the whole conversation with the neurologist. And she told us that the injuries aren't very deep, that if we see any impediment, it'd be in the use of her arms. Would she talk? Yes. Would she read? Yes. Jump, play, laugh. We know 3 years later those are resounding yes, yes, yes. As soon as the doctors left the room, Josh and I just collapsed into each other. How could this perfect little person have a brain injury? Could we handle this? And how could I ever make it up to her? On day 3 at main med, Edie was discharged to Josh's care, and we were able to stay in the recovery room together. I was still patient because my blood sodium level just would not level out on its own. So our first night together as a family, we dozed to the beep, beep, beep of that IV machine, with Josh on the couch and Edie in the bassinet, and my spirit just ripped to absolute shreds, but determined to break out of this joint. The following afternoon, the magic words came. You are ready to be discharged. Thank you, Goddess. We returned home to a house that had been completely rearranged to ease the pain of being back at the scene of the crime, our failed home birth. The thought and effort made by our loved ones and the care given by the nurses will never be matched. And even though an incredibly resilient and just an amazing person was born, there is still a deep grief for what we missed out on as a family. If I had it to do all over again, I'd never touch those herbs. They not only changed the trajectory of my birth, but they have changed how I exist in the world. It has taken strength that I don't always have to pull myself out of the hole that this experience has blown into my soul. When Edie is old enough to understand what really happened, I hope that she chooses to remember the 26 months that we nursed and forgets those first 26 hours that we were apart. It is a time that I know I will never forget and never fully remember.